There are people who move through the world with a softness that feels almost impossible. They are the ones who notice the subtle shifts in your voice when something is wrong. They are the ones who step in before you even ask. They are the ones who seem to have endless space inside them, space for your worries, your fears, your mistakes, your pain. Everyone sees their kindness. What few people see is the weight beneath it. Because if you look closely, you'll notice that their smile carries an undertone of strain. Their gentleness trembles at the edges. Their presence is calm, but their eyes sometimes reveal a deeper story. Something tired. Something stretched. Something quietly breaking. We teach children that kindness is simple, effortless, morally pure. But kindness is not a single note. It has depth, complexity, shadow. And when someone spends their entire life offering softness to others, they begin to erode in places no one notices. This is where the dark side of kindness begins, not in malice, not in cruelty, but in the silent cost carried by the ones who feel too much and speak too little. Kindness, for many, doesn't begin as a choice. It begins as a lesson. A survival strategy learned long before they can name it. Maybe they grew up in a home where conflict lurked around every corner, and staying small kept the peace. Maybe they learned that being helpful earned affection. That being agreeable drew praise. That putting their needs last kept them safe. And while other children learned what they liked, disliked, wanted, or needed, the chronically kind child learned something else entirely. I must not take up space. Over time, this becomes their blueprint for love. Love equals accepting. Love equals enduring. Love equals giving. Love equals silence. And by the time they grow into adults, the line between genuine kindness and self-erasure blurs. They aren't just being kind, they are surviving the only way they ever learned how. This is why kindness becomes their identity. Because in childhood, it wasn't just morally right. It was necessary. Think about the kindest person you know. They help without hesitation. They say yes before you finish asking. They carry burdens that are not theirs. They offer emotional labor the way others offer small talk. But there is something unspoken beneath all that giving. A script they cannot stop following. Kindness becomes automatic. Reflexive. A compulsion rather than a choice. They don't ask themselves whether they have the energy. They don't check in with their own needs. They don't pause to evaluate whether the request is fair. They simply give. Because somewhere along the way, kindness became the condition under which they believed they were allowed to exist. Their self-worth fused with how useful they were. Their identity merged with how much they could accommodate. And each time they give beyond their limits, something inside them thins. A quiet resentment grows. A quiet exhaustion deepens. A quiet voice whispers, "Do I matter as much as everyone else?" But that whisper is quickly silenced. Because the world praises their kindness, not their discomfort. Compassion is beautiful until it becomes constant. Until it becomes demanded. Until it becomes the default. Psychologists call this compassion fatigue, a point where too much empathy drains the emotional structure of a person. It happens to caregivers, therapists, nurses, teachers, but it also happens to everyday people who spend their lives holding others together. When someone absorbs more emotions than they can process, their body begins to respond as if under chronic stress. Headaches, insomnia, muscle tension, numbness, emotional detachment, burnout disguised as serenity. They keep offering warmth while feeling cold inside. They keep offering comfort while quietly aching. They keep offering time, energy, presence, while their own reserves run dangerously low. Kindness becomes erosion. Generosity becomes depletion. Compassion becomes a slow unraveling. Not because kindness is harmful, but because kindness without boundaries is unsustainable. There's a moment in every chronically kind person's life when they begin to realize that something subtle has shifted around them. People start expecting their kindness, depending on it, leaning on it. Not maliciously, not consciously, but naturally, because the kind person has made giving seem effortless. At first, it feels meaningful. To be needed. To be relied on. To be the one people trust. But over time, the pattern evolves. People stop asking if you're available, they assume you are. They stop checking if you're overwhelmed, they assume you'll manage. They stop considering your preferences, they assume you'll adjust. And somewhere in the quiet corners of your life, you begin to disappear. The disappearance is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not tragic in a theatrical way. It's subtle. It's the way people forget to ask how you are. It's the way they vent to you but never check in afterward. It's the way you get thanked for what you do, but rarely asked what you need. This is the paradox of kindness. The more reliable you are, the more invisible you risk becoming. Not because others do not care, but because kindness has taught them, over time, through repetition, that you will always bend, always absorb, always endure. And invisibility, even when earned through goodness, still hurts. Kind people are assumed to be endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly calm. But the truth is that the more they shoulder silently, the more difficult emotions begin to gather beneath their surface. Every sacrificed need becomes a small bruise. Every forced yes becomes a quiet fracture. Every unexpressed hurt becomes a knot in the chest. They swallow irritation to keep the peace. They swallow anger to avoid conflict. They swallow sadness so they don't burden others. But swallowed emotions do not dissolve. They accumulate. They sit in the throat. They weigh down the ribs. They thicken the silence around them. Over years, these small, ignored emotions begin to ferment into something heavier. Something darker. Something they never intended to carry. Something that eventually leaks out in ways they never expected. A small snap in their voice. A withdrawal from social circles. A sudden need for distance. A quiet resentment toward people they love deeply. Not because they are unkind, but because kindness became a cage. Inside that cage, every emotion they denied begins to press its hands against the walls, demanding recognition. We often imagine boundaries as logical, healthy, obvious. But to a chronically kind person, boundaries feel threatening. Setting a boundary means risking displeasure, risking conflict, risking being misunderstood, risking being labeled selfish. To someone who learned that love is conditional, boundaries feel like a gamble, a dare, a risk they fear they cannot afford. From childhood onward, they practice the script. Say yes to stay safe. Say yes to stay loved. Say yes to stay wanted. Say yes to stay enough. And so, as adults, they continue that script with frightening precision. But boundaries are not barriers, they are truths. They are the lines that separate healthy giving from self-destruction. They are the difference between kindness as freedom and kindness as a wound. Still, for the kind person, a boundary feels like a betrayal of the very identity they spent their life perfecting. This is the tragedy. The people who most need boundaries are often the ones least able to express them. So they keep giving. And the world keeps taking. And the cycle continues until something within them finally breaks. Empathy feels noble. It feels moral. It feels human. But the human brain was never designed to hold every emotion around it. Neuroscience shows that our mirror neurons light up when we witness suffering. The brain reacts as if the pain belongs to us. This creates connection, but also vulnerability. Chronic kindness hijacks this system. When someone is constantly exposed to the struggles of others, always listening, always absorbing, always carrying, stress hormones spike. The nervous system remains in a low-grade alert state. Sleep becomes shallow. Energy fades. The body begins to deteriorate under the invisible weight. This is why unbounded kindness becomes physically dangerous. The brain confuses ongoing empathy with ongoing threat. It does not distinguish emotional labor from actual crisis. It floods the body with responses meant for emergencies, even when the person is simply listening to someone vent. Kindness without balance becomes a neurological overload. Not because the person is weak, but because biology has limits that identity cannot override. There comes a point where the quiet exhaustion inside a kind person becomes impossible to ignore. A point where their smile feels heavier than ever before. A point where the space they once held for others begins to feel like a weight pressing down on their chest. It is rarely dramatic. Rarely explosive. Rarely obvious to the outside world. The collapse of a kind person is quiet. Subtle. Almost invisible. It happens in the way they linger in bed longer than usual, even though they still get up the moment someone needs them. It happens in the way they stare at messages, unable to respond, yet terrified of disappointing someone. It happens in the way they begin to lose interest in things that used to bring them comfort. It happens in the way they stop recognizing the person they see in the mirror. The world sees their strength. They feel they're breaking. And the tragedy is that when a kind person begins to crumble, those around them rarely notice. Not because they don't care, but because the kind person has mastered the art of appearing fine. For years they have been the safe place for others. For years they have been the shoulder, the listener, the helper, the healer. They have never been the one who falls apart. They have never been allowed to. So when they finally do, it feels like a betrayal of their own identity. Like failing at the only thing they've ever been praised for. This is one of the darkest points of the kind person's journey. The moment where they need help the most, yet feel the least entitled to ask for it. We often tell people, be kind to yourself. As if the phrase is easy to follow. As if it is simply a matter of choice. As if kindness is something they can easily redirect inward. But for the chronically kind person, self-kindness feels unnatural. Foreign. Almost forbidden. They have spent years learning to ignore their needs. To push down their desires. To silence their discomfort. To prioritize others at any cost. So when they consider turning that same gentleness inward, It feels like breaking a rule they didn't realize they were following. Self-kindness feels selfish. Self-kindness feels indulgent. Self-kindness feels undeserved. This is the internal conflict few people understand. Kind individuals are often the least able to treat themselves with the same compassion they freely give to others. But the truth remains undeniable. If kindness does not include the self, it is incomplete. Self-kindness is not self-centeredness. Self-kindness is not laziness. Self-kindness is not weakness. It is a necessary foundation. Because the person who refuses to care for themselves eventually loses the capacity to care for others in any meaningful way. Their emotional resources run dry. Their mental reserves collapse. Their body begins to protest in ways they can no longer hide. Self-kindness is not optional for the kind person. It is their survival. People often misunderstand boundaries. They confuse them with rejection. They confuse them with conflict. They confuse them with selfishness. But healthy boundaries are none of these things. Boundaries are clarity. Boundaries are honesty. Boundaries are care, both for oneself and for others. For the kind person, boundaries feel frightening because they push against years of learned behavior. Years of being agreeable. Years of obeying unspoken rules. Years of defining their worth through service. Setting a boundary feels like stepping into unfamiliar territory. It feels like exposing themselves. It feels like risking love. Yet boundaries are the purest form of truth the kind person can offer. A boundary says, I can't do this without hurting myself. I love you, but I also need space. I care, but I cannot give endlessly. My emotional capacity matters too. Healthy boundaries transform relationships. They sift out those who only value the kind person's compliance. They deepen bonds with those who truly care. They allow respect to flourish. They allow kindness to breathe. Without boundaries, kindness becomes a prison. With boundaries, kindness becomes a conscious, sustainable act. There is a form of kindness that harms. Not because the intentions are wrong, but because the impact becomes distorted. Psychologists call it pathological altruism. When helping becomes excessive, unbalanced, or destructive. When the kind person does everything for others, others never learn responsibility. When the kind person sacrifices their well-being, others begin to expect that sacrifice. When the kind person absorbs everyone's struggles, others stop confronting their own. Kindness transforms into a crutch, a dependency, a cycle of emotional reliance where the giver weakens and the receiver stagnates. The person offering the help becomes depleted. The person receiving it becomes dependent. Both remain trapped in a dynamic that prevents true growth. This is the dark irony. What looks like compassion on the surface can quietly sabotage both sides underneath. Healthy kindness empowers others. Unhealthy kindness disables them. Healthy kindness uplifts. Unhealthy kindness enables. Healthy kindness is shared. Unhealthy kindness is extracted. The kind person must learn that stepping back is sometimes the greatest act of love. For themselves. And for the people who must learn to stand without leaning entirely on them. In many cultures, kindness is praised in ways that slowly reshape a person's identity. Not because kindness is bad, but because the type of kindness that gets rewarded. is often the kind that demands self-erasure. From a young age, children hear phrases like, "She's such a good girl. She never causes trouble. He's so polite. He always listens. She's so helpful. She never asks for anything. He's so considerate. He always puts others first." These sound like compliments. They feel like praise. But beneath the praise lies a dangerous expectation. Goodness means obedience. Goodness means compliance. Goodness means not imposing. Goodness means shrinking. And as the child grows, these messages evolve into internal rules. Don't say no. Don't inconvenience anyone. Don't show anger. Don't take space. Don't express need. Don't contradict. This cultural conditioning is powerful because it disguises self-abandonment as virtue. It elevates self-sacrifice as morality. It frames endurance as maturity. It makes silence seem noble. But true kindness is not the absence of boundaries. True compassion is not the absence of self. True goodness is not measured by how little space you occupy. A world that values kindness must also value honesty, autonomy, and emotional truth. Otherwise, it is not encouraging kindness. It is encouraging invisibility. Researchers have long studied the personality trait known as agreeableness. It is associated with empathy, cooperation, warmth, and generosity, qualities we admire deeply. But within extreme agreeableness lies a hidden psychological toll. High agreeable individuals often struggle to express negative emotions. They avoid conflict even when conflict is necessary. They internalize stress rather than risk upsetting others. They suppress their own desires to maintain harmony. They take responsibility for the emotional climate around them. This chronic emotional suppression activates the body's stress systems. Increased cortisol, heightened muscle tension, insomnia, digestive issues, emotional numbness, depression masked by politeness. Agreeableness becomes a shield, a performance, a form of armor worn so long that it begins to fuse with the person wearing it. But armor is heavy, and over time, the weight becomes unbearable. This is why the kindest people sometimes feel strangely removed from themselves. Why they have difficulty identifying their own preferences. Why they feel disconnected from joy. Why they feel a persistent emptiness they can't quite name. They have spent so long shaping themselves around the expectations of others that their own emotional landscape has faded into the background. To reclaim that landscape requires not just courage, but the willingness to disappoint people, the willingness to disrupt harmony, the willingness to be authentic rather than agreeable. And for the chronically kind person, that is one of the bravest acts imaginable. Every social circle has someone everyone turns to. The strong one. The stable one. The endlessly patient one. The one who always listens, always understands, always absorbs the chaos around them without breaking. People admire them, depend on them, lean into them. But few ask what it costs to be that person. The mask of the strong one is polished. It is convincing. It is comforting to others. But beneath that mask lies a person who rarely receives the same support they give. This is the hidden paradox. The person who is there for everyone often has no one who notices when they need help. Not because people don't care, but because the strong one has spent years pretending they don't need anything. They are fluent in the language of emotional support, but unfamiliar with the language of asking. They hide their fears behind reassurance. They hide their pain behind advice. They hide their exhaustion behind consistency. Being the strong one is often a role assigned, not chosen. A role shaped by childhood dynamics. A role reinforced by social expectations. A role praised so consistently that stepping out of it feels impossible. And yet, every strong person reaches a moment when the mask begins to crack. Not dramatically, but quietly. A shaky voice. A silent breakdown behind closed doors. A moment where their inner world trembles in ways no one sees. This vulnerability is not weakness. It is humanity. And it is the moment where genuine healing begins. Kindness, when given freely, feels expansive. It fills the space around it with warmth and connection. But kindness given from emptiness becomes something else entirely. It transforms into resentment. Resentment is not anger. Resentment is grief. Resentment is the mourning of all the parts of yourself you abandoned in the name of being good. It emerges slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it is a tired sigh after doing something you didn't want to do. Then it is a tightness in your chest when someone asks for just one more thing. Then it becomes emotional withdrawal. Pulling back not because you don't care, but because caring has become painful. And eventually, it becomes a silent realization. I give so much, yet I feel unseen. Resentment is not evidence of cruelty. It is evidence of imbalance. It appears when the cost of kindness becomes greater than the reward of connection. When giving no longer feels generous, but obligatory, expected, extractive. Resentment is the kind person's alarm system. It warns them that their boundaries have been violated, often by themselves. But most kind people ignore this alarm. They shame themselves for feeling it. They tell themselves they should be more patient, more generous, more understanding. But healing begins the moment resentment is acknowledged. Because resentment is simply the truth knocking, after being ignored for far too long. Every time the kind person says yes when they wanted to say no, they take on a small emotional debt. It might not feel significant in the moment. A favor here, a concession there, a sacrifice no one asked for but everyone benefits from. But these small debts accumulate. A yes offered out of obligation becomes a hidden weight. A no that never gets spoken becomes a quiet burden. An evening spent comforting someone else becomes one less evening spent resting. A heart extended outward becomes a heart turned away from itself. Emotional debt grows silently. It grows in the spaces where authentic expression should have lived. It grows in the cracks left behind by suppressed needs. It grows in the gaps between who the person is and who they feel required to be. And the cruel irony is this. Kind people carry emotional debt even toward those they love the most. They forgive too quickly. They compromise too easily. They sacrifice their own well-being for relationships they fear will crumble without their constant effort. But relationships built on emotional debt are not relationships. They are imbalances. They are structures supported by one person's exhaustion. They are dynamics where one gives and the other receives. Not out of malice, but out of habit. Over time, the emotional debt becomes so heavy that the kind person begins to break under its weight. And yet, even in breaking, they still feel guilty for wanting relief. For kind people, silence becomes a language all its own. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of avoidance. The silence that protects others while harming oneself. They stay silent when someone hurts them. Silent when they feel overwhelmed. Silent when their limits have been crossed. Silent when they need support. Silent even when their heart aches for someone to notice. This silence is not chosen, it is inherited. A survival instinct learned in childhood. A reflex shaped by years of prioritizing harmony over honesty. But silence has a cost. It traps emotions inside the body. It turns unspoken truths into internal storms. It transforms the person's inner world into a place where everything is felt but nothing is named. And because they do not speak, they are rarely heard. Because they do not express their pain, others assume they have none. Because they hide their neediness, others assume they do not need. Silence becomes their prison. Kindness becomes their chains. And the world praises them for it. But deep inside, the kind person knows. The silence is eating them alive. Every chronically kind person reaches a moment of reckoning. A moment where something inside them refuses to continue. A moment where the cost of kindness becomes undeniable. This turning point is rarely dramatic. It is not a breakdown in the traditional sense. It is not an outburst or a rupture. It is a quiet realization. A whisper rising from the depths of their being. I can't keep living like this. It might come after a particularly exhausting week. It might come after being taken for granted one too many times. It might come after they find themselves crying in the bathroom. Not because of one big event, but because of the accumulation of 1,000 small ones. And in that moment, something shifts. They begin to question patterns that felt unquestionable. They begin to see the ways they have been disappearing. They begin to recognize the resentment hiding in their chest. They begin to understand that kindness has become their mask, and that the mask has grown too heavy to hold. This turning point is painful. It is disorienting. It feels like losing part of their identity. But it is also the beginning of freedom. Because transformation always begins with truth. And the truth is that kindness without self-love is no longer kindness. It is compliance. Healing begins slowly, gently, with small acts that feel foreign at first. The kind person begins saying no, hesitantly at first, apologizing each time. They take longer to respond to messages. They excuse themselves from emotional labor that drains them. They ask for rest. They ask for space. They ask for understanding. Every act feels like rebellion. Every boundary feels like risk. Every moment of self-kindness feels undeserved. But something remarkable happens in this process. Their kindness becomes stronger, not weaker. Because kindness that includes the self is rooted in abundance, not depletion. It becomes intentional rather than reflexive. It becomes honest rather than performative. It becomes generosity rather than sacrifice. The kind person begins rediscovering who they are when they are not constantly shaping themselves around others. They reconnect with old passions. They rediscover quiet joys. They remember the parts of themselves that once thrived before they drowned in obligation. And slowly, they realize that kindness is not something they must die for. It is something they can live with. Fully, openly, truthfully. Kindness becomes a choice again. A gift. A truth. A homecoming. Anger is often misunderstood by kind people. They believe anger makes them cruel, makes them dangerous, makes them unworthy of love. So they swallow it, push it down, mask it with gentleness. But anger was never the enemy. Anger is clarity. Anger is direction. Anger is the voice of a boundary that has been crossed. When the chronically kind person finally allows themselves to feel anger, it does not turn them into someone cruel. It turns them into someone honest. Anger reveals the places where they were abandoned, often by themselves. It reveals the relationships where they were used. It reveals the patterns where they gave too much. It reveals the moments where they betrayed their own needs to keep others comfortable. This revelation is painful. It is destabilizing. It forces them to confront truths they avoided for years. But anger is also healing. It points toward the boundaries they have long ignored. It points toward the relationships that need rebalancing. It points toward the wounds that deserve care. And when anger is met with self-compassion rather than shame, it transforms from a monster in the shadows into a guide that leads the kind person back to themselves. No is a small word with tremendous power. For many kind people, it is the most terrifying word in their vocabulary. They fear it will shatter relationships. They fear it will disappoint others. They fear it will make them unlovable. But as they begin learning to say no, something unexpected happens. Their relationships become clearer. The ones built on genuine care remain steady. The ones built on convenience begin to fade. Saying no teaches the kind person who truly values them, and who only valued their compliance. But even beyond relationships, saying no becomes an act of liberation. It gives the kind person permission to rest, permission to protect their peace, permission to choose for themselves, permission to take up space in their own life. Every no becomes a quiet declaration. My needs matter. My time matters. My energy matters. I matter. And with each no, their yes becomes more meaningful, more honest, more aligned with their truth. This is the paradox. When you stop giving from fear, your giving becomes more powerful. The greatest transformation of all happens when the kind person finally turns inward. Not in withdrawal, but in recognition. They begin to relearn the parts of themselves that were buried under years of emotional labor. The hobbies they set aside. The passions they muted. The dreams they postponed. The opinions they softened. The identity they once abandoned to fit the mold of the good one. Piece by piece, they reclaim their life. They start asking what they actually want. Not what is expected. Not what keeps the peace. Not what earns approval. They begin sleeping without guilt. Resting without apology. Choosing without fear. Feeling without restraint. And as they return to themselves, something remarkable happens. Their kindness becomes deeper than ever before. Not because they are selfless, but because they are whole. Not because they are compliant, but because they are authentic. Not because they are bending, but because they are rooted. The world sees the same kindness, but now it comes from a different place. A place of strength rather than depletion. Abundance rather than emptiness. Truth rather than performance. This return to the self is not the end of their kindness. It is the beginning of its most powerful form. And now, at the end of this journey, the truth reveals itself in full clarity. The dark side of kindness was never the presence of anger, or the presence of boundaries, or the presence of limits. The dark side was the absence of self. Kindness without self-awareness becomes sacrifice. Kindness without boundaries becomes exploitation. Kindness without honesty becomes resentment. Kindness without self-love becomes self-destruction. But kindness that includes the self, that honors your needs, your voice, your truth, is the kind of kindness that can transform lives. It heals rather than harms. It empowers rather than depletes. It strengthens rather than erodes. This is the kindness the world needs most. Not the kind that silences its own suffering. Not the kind that disappears into the background. Not the kind that breaks itself to keep others whole. But the kind that stands tall. The kind that breathes. The kind that chooses truth over performance. The kind that offers love without abandoning itself. So the next time someone tells you that you are kind, pause and ask yourself, is this kindness coming from fear? Or from freedom? From exhaustion? Or from abundance? From a mask? Or from the real me? Because the greatest act of kindness you will ever offer the world is the kindness you first offer yourself.